Sup everyone, this is Dimitri, and today I wanted to talk about spinal compression and axial fatigue. First off, let's differentiate between the two. Even though these two terms are quite closely related, they don't mean the same thing. And first off, let's talk about spinal compression. I think the simplest way to think about it is that spinal compression is something that happens whenever you put any kind of load on your spine. And what a lot of people are afraid of is acute injury coming from spinal compression, like a herniated disc or some such. In my opinion, it's not something that most people should be worried about. If you're using proper technique, full range of motion, etc., then you really shouldn't have a problem. And as a matter of fact, in general life, putting tension on your spine should be quite beneficial to your health, and strengthening those structures is quite useful in just day-to-day life and preventing injury from daily activities. Now, axial fatigue is actually a lot more relevant to training, and it is something that as well happens whenever you put load on your spine, but for a different reason. Axial fatigue can be thought of as spinal erector fatigue, and those are the two muscles which run along your spine and help straighten it. They are most prominently used in big heavy compound movements such as the squat, the deadlift, and also the barbell row, for example, but they can also interfere with a lot of other movements, and this should be planned around in an intelligently made program. And thinking about axial fatigue should be done both within the session and between sessions. Let's take a look at an example. In my current program on day 2, I do legs, and I start off with a SLDL, which is quite a heavy movement for the spine erectors. And if I was starting off with a regular deadlift, this would be even more of the case. After that, I do two movements, which are the machine calves and the leg press, neither of which load the spine, so it allows me to recover quite nicely before doing a split squat, which also uses the spinal erectors to a fair extent. Even though not nearly as much as the SODL. And this allows me to bring my quads and my glutes near failure without my spine rounding over, presenting a increased injury risk and limiting the actual hypertrophy stimulus to the target muscles, instead of just my spinal erectors giving out and me not being able to continue doing the exercise. That is within the session planning, and between sessions, the next day I have is a push day, and naturally there is not much spinal loading there, although one thing I would advise you against is putting something like an overhead press, especially standing, because that would actually load the spine quite a bit, and it would be quite uncomfortable to do it on the day straight after your SLDLs or whatever else. This whole thing with axial fatigue is most relevant to leg days because there is a lot of force transfer through the spine, but also it interacts with your back day, especially if you're doing it the next time you come into the gym, especially on the next day after your leg day. For the next example, on day 5 I do legs again, and on day 6 I do a whole upper day. And on that upper day is my horizontal pulling day. That means I do a heavy-ish barbell row, so naturally I wouldn't want to present that much of a fatigue to my spinal erectors on the day before. At first glance this may seem like backwards thinking, but actually my priorities right now are on my upper body development and not on my legs, so I would rather limit my leg volume to accommodate more stimulus to my back development. So on the day before I do just one spinal loading movement, and even then it's a fairly light movement, that is the heel elevated squat, instead of something like a low bar back squat, which would tax the erectors quite a lot and present a lot of axial fatigue. So what are the takeaways here? Don't be afraid of spinal loading by itself, and it might be actually a good thing for injury proofing yourself. Think about axial fatigue and don't mix in a bunch of heavy spinal loading exercises within a session, and if you do, then try to space them out a little bit to give your spine a bit of time to recover, so that you can actually develop the target muscles instead of just taxing your spinal erectors to hell. And the last thing, whenever you make a program, think about what you're going to be doing after the day which you're training, and give your back some time to recover before using the spinal erectors again. For example, just put your push days after your leg days, or just put a rest day after your leg day, or just make the exercises themselves less axially fatiguing on that leg day. And the same thing goes the other way. You probably shouldn't be doing heavy barbell rows before your deadlift day if your deadlift strength or the muscle which it grows are important to you. That's pretty much it. See ya.